The loudest, most gut-wrenching sound I've ever heard wasn't a scream or an explosion. It was metal scraping against metal as a massive tow truck dragged my brand-new Sea-Doo Jetski, my pride and joy, across my concrete driveway, leaving deep, jagged scratches behind. The winch wrapped around its sleek blue body like a snake crushing its prey, while the back end bounced and twisted violently. I was yelling. My wife was crying. And Karen, yes, that Karen from the HOA, stood with her arms folded, watching the entire thing like it was a TV show she was proud to direct. And when I ran toward the tow truck to stop it, she called the cops on me. 3 hours later, my Jetski was in pieces. The tow company had dropped it off in some random impound lot where it got crushed between a trailer and a rusted-out pickup. $17,000. Gone. And the worst part? I still had no idea why she did it. But let me tell you where all this started. Because back then, I thought I was doing something good, something generous. We moved into Lakeside Glen 6 months ago. It's one of those gated communities that looks like a magazine cover. Rows of palm trees, identical driveways, a man-made lake in the center. We bought the house after I got promoted to head technician at a solar firm, and my wife, Denise, had just started her own wellness brand. Things were finally turning around for us. After years of struggle, we were stable, comfortable. Now this HOA, we didn't know much about them at first. We got the welcome packet, of course. All the guidelines and expectations. Some of it was normal. Lawn care, garbage days, no excessive noise. But then there were rules that felt weird. No visible recreational vehicles on the property. Okay, fine. All outdoor decor must be pre-approved by HOA Design Review Board. Okay, a little much, but sure. But here's the thing. The Jetski wasn't visible. I had a storage canopy set up behind the fence that wrapped around my backyard. You could only see it if you walked into my backyard, which would mean trespassing. So I thought, I'm good. Turns out Karen didn't think so. Karen Thompson was the acting president of the HOA, mid-50s, platinum blonde hair that never moved, permanent frown, drove a black Mercedes and wore tennis skirts like she was still in high school. She lived 5 houses down from us, in the big corner lot with the American flag waving from a perfectly white pole. The first time I met her, I waved. She didn't wave back. The trouble started small. First, she left a folded letter on our doorstep. No stamp, not even sealed. It said, "Please remove any watercraft from your property to maintain visual integrity of the community. HOA Regulation 5.2. I read it out loud to Denise, and we both laughed. "She's joking, right?" Denise said. "It's not even visible from the street," I replied. "I checked, multiple angles." So we ignored it. 3 days later, the HOA fined us $75 for non-compliance. Now I was annoyed. I emailed the HOA board with pictures of my yard, wide shots, drone shots, everything, proving that the Jetski was hidden. A guy named Lewis responded saying he'd look into it. I thought that was the end of it. But 2 weeks passed, then 3, no update. Meanwhile, I noticed Karen walking her dog past my house every morning. At first, I thought it was a coincidence, but then I realized she'd stop, just for a second, and take pictures over our fence. She had this little silver phone, and she'd snap, then pretend she was texting. Denise saw it too. "Should we confront her?" Denise asked one night while we were eating dinner on the patio. "No," I said. "I don't want to start a war over something this stupid." Still, I started to get nervous. I double-checked the fence, made sure the canopy wasn't leaning or sagging, even threw a tarp over the Jetski. It looked like a pile of junk now. But hey, at least it was hidden. The next day, I got another fine. This one was $200, and now I was mad. I called Lewis, the guy who emailed me before, but he wasn't available. I left a voicemail. Then I called the HOA general line. No one picked up. I even knocked on Karen's door once, but no one answered. Denise started getting anxious. "Babe, what if they try to take it?" "They can't," I said. they'd need a court order or something. And I haven't even had a hearing. But I was wrong. I didn't know that the HOA had recently voted to give the president emergency enforcement privileges for aesthetic violations. It was buried in the last monthly meeting minutes, which I hadn't read, because who reads those things? Then came the morning. It was a Saturday. We were sleeping in. Denise had her silk bonnet on. I was knocked out from a late-night coding session. Then the sound hit, loud clanking, metal dragging. At first, I thought it was a garbage truck, but then I heard Denise scream from the bedroom window. "Michael, they're taking the Jetski!" I jumped out of bed and ran outside in my slippers. There it was, a huge white tow truck, backing into my driveway like it owned the place. The driver didn't even look at me. He was already winching the Jetski out from behind the fence. The canopy had been knocked over, and the tarp flapped in the wind like a surrender flag. Karen stood on the sidewalk in her tennis skirt, sipping coffee from a pink cup. "What the hell are you doing?" I shouted. "It's an unauthorized item on community property," she said calmly. "I'm executing my rights as HOA president." "That's my private property, in my backyard." "If you'd attended the last meeting," she said, "you'd know this is now allowed under Section 9.1 of the updated enforcement policy." I ran toward the driver. Denise tried to block the truck from backing up. The guy didn't even blink. He just kept loading it up like it was garbage. Then Karen pulled out her phone. "Step back or I'm calling the police." "You're already trespassing," I snapped. "I'm enforcing a regulation," she said. "Any attempt to stop the removal will be treated as harassment." And just like that, they were gone. I followed them to the impound lot, but they wouldn't let me in without a release form. The lady at the counter barely looked at me. "Jetski came in hot," she muttered. "Looks like it got wedged under another trailer. Damage was significant." "How bad?" I asked. She turned her monitor toward me, and I saw it. The crushed seat, the cracked fiberglass hull, the handlebars twisted like spaghetti. It was totaled, but what she said next made my stomach drop. "Oh, by the way, you're not the one who signed the tow request." I blinked. "What?" "It wasn't your name on the form." I froze, my fists clenched, and that's when I realized Karen had forged something, or someone had helped her, and I was going to find out who. But first, I had to get my hands on that document, and I had no idea how deep this rabbit hole would go. The photo of my crushed Jetski burned into my brain like a scar I couldn't scrub off. I drove home that afternoon in silence, gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. Denise didn't say much either. She sat beside me, arms folded, staring out the window, 100 emotions fighting behind her eyes: anger, confusion, sadness. That thing wasn't just a toy. It was a celebration. I'd bought it after we closed on the house. It was a symbol of all we'd overcome. Now, it was mangled metal sitting in a junk lot. I couldn't sleep that night. I kept turning over the impound clerk's words, "You're not the one who signed the tow request." That meant Karen either lied outright or she convinced someone to pretend they had the authority. Either way, something wasn't adding up. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open and a strong cup of black coffee in hand. First thing I did was pull up the HOA's website. Buried inside the resident portal was a section for enforcement logs, password protected. I had to dig through old emails just to remember my login. But once I got in, I found it, an entry dated just 3 days before the Jetski was towed. Enforcement Order 3297, recreational vehicle violation, authorization, board president, executed by Apex Towing Services. That was it. No meeting minutes, no vote, no notice sent to me directly. Just that little line, approved by Karen Thompson. I wanted to scream. The next morning, I went to the HOA office. It wasn't far, just a little unit tucked behind the plaza by the lake. I parked, walked in, and there was Louis, the guy who'd emailed me weeks back. He was tall, young, maybe 30, with glasses and a nervous look on his face. "Hi," I said. "We emailed. Michael Avery." My jet ski was towed. Oh, he said, blinking rapidly. Yes. I remember. Great. I need to see the document that authorized the tow, the one with the signature. He hesitated. I don't think I'm allowed to show you that. It's about my property, I said. And if someone forged my signature or someone else's, I deserve to know. He looked around, lowered his voice. Off the record, you didn't sign it, but I didn't say that. Okay? I stared at him. Who did? He shook his head. I can't. I'll lose my job. Look, just file a formal request. It'll go to the review board. How long does that take? 4 to 6 weeks. 4 to 6 weeks? My jet ski was already beyond saving. What was I supposed to do? Wait until the engine rusted to dust? I left, fuming. That night, I started talking to neighbors. Quietly, carefully. First, it was Rick and Dana, the couple across the street who always waved from their porch. Rick was a retired firefighter. Dana ran a small Etsy shop. I didn't think they were the type to care much about HOA drama, but as soon as I mentioned Karen, Dana rolled her eyes so hard I thought they'd get stuck. She reported our Halloween pumpkins last year, she said. Said they were offensive. Rick nodded. Yeah, she thinks she runs this whole neighborhood. I asked if they'd heard of anyone else getting their stuff towed. Rick paused. There was that thing with the canoe, he said. Down on Myrtle Drive, couple months back. Some guy had it on a rack behind his fence. Next thing he knew, gone. What happened? I asked. They never got it back. Fined for storage of recreational equipment. That was it. Same playbook. Over the next few days, I kept asking around. I found out Karen had pulled similar stunts on at least 5 other homeowners. A small trailer, a vintage motorcycle, even a kid's trampoline, gone after she cited safety violations. And all of them had one thing in common. They fought. She ignored them. They filed complaints. Nothing happened. It was like Karen had a wall around her. Denise and I talked late into the night about what to do. You know what this feels like? She said, curled up on the couch beside me. It's not about the jet ski. She wants control. She gets off on making people feel small. She picked the wrong people this time, I said. So we made a plan. I'd gather everything, photos, emails, fine notices, impound records, and file a formal grievance with the HOA. Not just about the tow, but about her abuse of power. Then we'd take it to the county, because if she forged a document, that wasn't just an HOA issue. That was fraud. But before we could get the papers together, something happened. Something that changed everything. One night, around 2 a.m., we were asleep when we heard a loud knock on the door. Not a soft tap. A pounding. Repeated. I jumped up, heart racing, and ran to the door. Denise followed behind me, half asleep. I peeked through the peephole and saw flashing red and blue lights outside. 2 police cars. When I opened the door, a tall officer stepped forward. He looked serious. Mr. Avery? Yes? We need you to come with us. There's been an incident. My throat tightened. What kind of incident? He looked past me into the house, then back at me. There's been a break-in. HOA office. Your name came up. My heart stopped. What? You're not in trouble, he said quickly. But someone left something behind, with your signature on it. I glanced at Denise. Her face was pale. Wait, what do you mean my signature? The officer lowered his voice. We think someone's trying to frame you. And just like that, everything turned upside down. Who would try to frame me? Why? And what had they left behind? I didn't know it yet. But this wasn't just about a jet ski anymore. This was about someone willing to lie, cheat, and maybe worse, just to stay in control. And the deeper I got, the more dangerous it became. The police cruiser was quiet, except for the faint static of the radio and the occasional clack of the officer's fingers on his dashboard tablet. I sat in the back, still wearing my hoodie and pajama pants, trying to wrap my head around what just happened. Denise wanted to come, but they told her to stay home, just in case this turned out to be something bigger. Bigger than a jet ski? Bigger than forged documents? Apparently, yes. When we pulled up to the HOA office, yellow tape crisscrossed the entrance. One of the glass panels in the door had been shattered. Officers were walking in and out with flashlights and sealed bags. A detective, older guy with a bald head and a gray goatee, approached the car as soon as I stepped out. "Mr. Avery?" "Yeah. Detective Monroe. I need you to take a look at something." We walked inside. The place was a mess. Drawers open, papers everywhere, a printer tipped sideways. He led me to a table near the back where an evidence bag sat under a harsh desk lamp. Inside was a file folder. I recognized the name written across the tab, Jetski Removal, Avery Property. Detective Monroe pointed at the form inside. "That's your signature, isn't it?" I leaned over and looked closer. It was my name, Michael Avery, in cursive, right above a line that said, "Owner Authorization." But I didn't sign it. The handwriting was close, but the M was off. The loop was wrong, too round. "No," I said. "That's not mine." The detective nodded slowly. "Thought so. Thing is, this was left sitting on the desk after someone broke in here. Nothing else was stolen, just drawers pulled out, papers scattered. But this folder? It was placed right on the center of the desk." "Why?" I asked. "What does that mean?" "It means someone wants you to be the fall guy," he replied. "Make it look like you forged your own document, and then broke in to plant it." "That makes no sense." "It does," he said, "if the real forger is panicking." I sat down, hard. My legs felt like wet spaghetti. "Am I under arrest?" I asked quietly. "Not yet," he said, "but stay close." I went home that morning as the sun was coming up. Denise had been pacing all night. As soon as I walked in, she rushed to me. "What happened?" I told her everything. She sat down slowly, her eyes wide. "So someone's trying to pin this on you?" "Yeah," I said. "But they messed up. I never signed anything. And now the cops are involved." "Do you think Karen did it?" she asked. I hesitated. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but deep down, I already knew. She's the only one who had a reason. We decided not to say anything to anyone for now, not the neighbors, not even Rick and Dana. We needed to see what the police would do. That was a mistake. 3 days later, Karen called an emergency HOA meeting. It was held in the clubhouse, one of those fake fancy rooms with marble floors and folding chairs. I didn't plan to go, but then Dana texted me, "You need to come. She's saying stuff about you. It's bad." So I went. The room was full. About 30 residents showed up. Karen stood at the front, holding a folder and wearing that same smug smile she always had. When she saw me enter, her smile twitched, but she didn't flinch. "Before we begin," she said to the crowd, "I want to address a serious situation regarding a recent break-in at the HOA office." Whispers spread across the room. Evidence was discovered that links the break-in to a resident. I can't name names, of course, but I ask that we remain vigilant and protect the integrity of this community. People turned to look at me, some whispering, some staring openly. I stood up. "Are you accusing me?" Karen raised a brow. "I didn't say that, Mr. Avery. You're the one who had my jet ski towed illegally. You forged my name." Gasps filled the room. Karen blinked slowly. "That's a very serious accusation. I've got the tow company's logs. The police have the forged form. You want to talk about integrity?" "Perhaps you should speak to Detective Monroe," she said, her voice cool. "He stopped by my home yesterday." My jaw clenched. She was trying to get ahead of it, twist the story, turn neighbors into jurors. Rick stood up. "Enough. If you have proof he did something wrong, show it. Otherwise, this meeting is just gossip." Karen stiffened. "This is about preserving order." "No," Dana said, standing next to her husband. "This is about you being out of control." A small ripple of murmurs moved through the room. A few people nodded. I left before it turned into a shouting match. Denise was waiting outside in the car. "What happened?" she asked. "She's trying to make me the villain," I said, "but people are starting to doubt her." Later that night, after the meeting, I got an anonymous email. No subject, just one line. "Check the security camera at 2:12 a.m. Thursday." Attached was a file. I opened it. It was grainy, black and white, but it clearly showed someone inside the HOA office. Slender, hoodie, baseball cap, gloved hands. They moved quickly, flipping drawers, scattering papers, and then, at 2:12 a.m. exactly, they walked to the center desk, pulled out a folder, and placed it carefully in the middle. Then they turned, looked directly at the camera, only for a second, and left. I zoomed in on the face. The angle was bad. The hoodie covered most of it. But there was something familiar about the way they walked, their posture. I replayed the clip over and over, then I paused it at just the right second. The person had a limp, barely noticeable, but it was there, and only one person I knew in this neighborhood had that limp. Lewis, the quiet HOA assistant, which meant Karen didn't act alone. And the conspiracy was even deeper than I thought. I watched the footage at least 20 times that night, each time noticing more. The slight drag in the left leg, the way the intruder used their right hand to steady themselves as they leaned over the desk. It was subtle, but once you saw it, you couldn't unsee it. Lewis, the HOA assistant, always had that awkward walk. Something he said was from an old college basketball injury. Now, I wasn't just dealing with a power-hungry HOA president. I was dealing with a cover-up, possibly a crime ring hiding behind golf polos and lawn care fines. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the dining table with the security footage paused, trying to decide my next move. Denise came out of the bedroom, bleary-eyed and in her robe, and sat across from me. "You're still up?" "I think Louis was the one who broke into the office." "What?" she said, suddenly wide awake. I explained everything, the limp, the camera angle, the way the folder was planted so obviously. "If I take this to the police," I said, "and I'm wrong, they'll think I'm just trying to shift blame." Denise rubbed her temples. "So what do we do?" "We need proof. Something more than this footage. Something that ties him to Karen directly." The next morning, I went back to the HOA office. It was closed, but I waited in my car until Lewis showed up. He looked tired, nervous. When he unlocked the door, I slid out of my car and caught up to him before he could get inside. "Hey, Louis." He jumped. "Michael, hi. We need to talk," I said. He hesitated. "Now's not a good time." I stared at him. "You limped into the HOA office at 2:12 a.m. last Thursday. The break-in. I have the footage." He froze. "I don't want to hurt you," I said quickly, "but I need to know the truth. Why'd you do it?" He looked around, then back at me. His shoulders sagged like the weight of what he was carrying was finally too much. "She made me," he whispered. "Karen. She told me if I didn't do it, she'd fire me. Said I'd never work again in this state. She forged the first document, but after the Jetski got damaged, she panicked. Thought you'd sue. So she planted a second one, to make it look like you staged the whole thing." I swallowed hard. "So it was her." Louis nodded. "She said she had friends on the county board, judges, people who could make my life hell. I didn't want to, I swear." "I need that original document," I said, "the real one, the one she forged before the break-in." "I don't have it," he said, "but I know where she keeps the backups." That was all I needed to hear. We made a plan. Lewis would accidentally leave the HOA office unlocked one afternoon while Karen was at her weekly tennis game. I'd go in, grab a copy of the forged tow request with her signature, and take it straight to Detective Monroe. It sounded simple, but it wasn't. Because that same day, just hours before our plan was supposed to happen, something unexpected happened. A letter arrived at my house, hand-delivered, no postage. Just a cream-colored envelope with a gold-embossed stamp that read, "Legal Action Notification. Lakeside Glen HOA. Inside was a notice of civil complaint. Karen was suing me for defamation. She accused me of publicly damaging her reputation with false statements, causing emotional distress, and disrupting HOA operations. I stood in the kitchen, holding the paper, barely able to read the words. Denise read over my shoulder and gasped. "She's suing you? She's trying to shut me up, scare me into backing off." But she underestimated me. I wasn't going down like that. I called Detective Monroe, told him everything Louis had said. I forwarded the anonymous security footage and gave him a timeline. He didn't say much, but his tone changed. "We'll look into it. But tread carefully, Mr. Avery." Tread carefully? I was being sued, framed, and now I had to break into the HOA office just to get proof that I wasn't losing my mind. The next day, the trap was set. Louis texted me one word: open. I waited until 2 p.m., when I knew Karen would be on the far side of the community at her tennis club. I parked, walked casually toward the HOA building, glanced around, then stepped inside. The office was quiet. The lights were off. I moved fast. Louis said the backup files were in the second drawer of the back filing cabinet. I opened it, flipped through manila folders, garbage violations, lawn fines, noise complaints, until I found it. Tow authorization, Avery. There it was, Karen's signature, clear as day. I pulled it out, and just as I turned to leave, the door slammed open. I froze. Karen stood in the doorway, tennis racket still in hand, eyes burning with rage. She looked at the folder in my hand. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life," she said. Then she reached into her handbag and pulled out her phone. But it wasn't just to call the police. She started recording. "Caught in the act," she said. "Breaking and entering. Theft of HOA documents. Oh, you're going down for this." I tried to speak, to explain, but she just kept recording. And then, without warning, she screamed, loud, high-pitched, as if I'd attacked her. Footsteps echoed down the sidewalk. 2 security guards from the plaza appeared, rushing toward the door. Karen's voice rose, hysterical. "He threatened me! He threatened me!" The guards grabbed me by the arms. I didn't fight. I just looked at Karen, who smiled, sweet and cruel. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't just about power anymore. Karen was willing to destroy anyone who got in her way. And now, she had set her sights on me. The cold metal of the handcuffs bit into my wrists as the guards pinned me down outside the HOA office. A crowd had already gathered. Neighbors, passers-by, even a few curious teenagers with phones out, recording every second. Karen stood a few feet away, still clutching her tennis racket and her phone, voice trembling in the most Oscar-worthy performance I'd ever seen. "He broke into the office," she cried. "He pushed me! I was terrified! He lunged at me!" I didn't say a word. Not because I couldn't defend myself, but because I knew how this would look if I did. Loud black man versus trembling HOA president with tennis whites and crocodile tears. I'd seen this movie before, and I knew how it ended, unless I changed the script. The guards dragged me to the plaza security office and called the sheriff's department. I sat in a small room with cracked leather chairs and one too many neighborhood watch posters. Denise was allowed in after an hour. Her eyes were red, but her voice was steady. "I called Detective Monroe," she said, gripping my hand tightly. "I told him everything." "Good," I replied, "because Karen is trying to frame me for everything she did." An hour later, Monroe walked in with a clipboard and a face that didn't look like it had been sleeping much lately. He looked at the guards, waved them away, and then turned to me. "Tell me exactly what happened." I did. From Louis's confession to the folder in the filing cabinet, to the way Karen burst in, camera rolling, acting like I was some kind of burglar. He didn't say a word until I finished. Then he reached into his coat and pulled out a small flash drive. "This was sent to my office anonymously last night," he said. It's a backup of the security footage from inside the HOA office. Shows you walking in, calm, focused, no forced entry, and then Karen showing up 15 minutes earlier than she was supposed to be back. My eyes narrowed. She knew. She knew, Monroe confirmed. Lewis tipped her off, probably under pressure again. We've already pulled his call logs. And now? I asked. Monroe smiled for the first time since I met him. Now, we press charges against Karen for falsifying documents, misappropriation of HOA funds, and obstruction of justice. It felt like my lungs finally inflated again. 2 days later, Karen was arrested at her home. The news spread through the neighborhood faster than wildfire. For the first time in months, our street felt different, lighter. Neighbors came by to check in, offer support, or share their own horror stories about Karen's reign. Turns out, she'd been doing this for years. Fines that weren't documented, repairs paid for with HOA funds that never happened, even a fake landscaping invoice to a company that didn't exist, one that traced back to a bank account in her maiden name. It was all unraveling, but the lawsuit she filed against me, that still stood. Until Denise and I did something she never expected. We hosted a neighborhood gathering, not just for the HOA drama, but as a way to reconnect everyone Karen had isolated. We brought out a grill, set up tables, had games for the kids, and when everyone was gathered, I stood up and told my story, start to finish. No yelling, no anger, just facts, the Jetski, the forged document, the break-in, the arrest. I ended with one thing that Karen never had, an apology. I'm sorry if any of this made our community feel divided. That was never my intention. I just wanted the truth to come out. And I want us to be better. Together. Silence. Then applause. Real applause. A few days later, the lawsuit was quietly dropped. No court dates, no settlement, just gone. But Karen wasn't done yet. Even from jail, she tried to cling to her power, filed motions, wrote letters to the HOA board, claimed the whole thing was a conspiracy against strong women. It would have been funny if it weren't so pathetic. And just when we thought the worst was behind us, it happened again. I woke up one morning to find our garage door wide open. Inside, the tarp covering my spare generator was ripped and spray painted on the back wall in red paint. This isn't over. I called the police. They dusted for prints, took photos. But I already knew. Karen wasn't working alone, and someone in our neighborhood was still doing her bidding. The war wasn't over. Not yet. I stood there staring at the red spray paint dripping down the back wall of my garage. The message was clear and personal. This isn't over. Denise came to the doorway behind me, wrapped in her robe, holding her phone tight in one hand. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Her eyes said it all: fear, disbelief, and that look she gets when she's calculating 5 moves ahead. We both knew this wasn't just vandalism. It was a message, a warning, maybe even a threat. I called Detective Monroe immediately. He came by that same morning, more serious than usual. He examined the wall, the broken tarp, and the paint. This wasn't Karen, he said finally. She's still locked up. Phone and visitor logs are monitored. Then who? I asked. Whoever it is, they want you scared. And you're not just dealing with Karen anymore. You're dealing with a network. A network. That word hit me like a brick. All this time I thought Karen was just a one-woman wrecking crew with a clipboard and a god complex. But what if she was the face of something deeper? Something older than her fake HOA title? Monroe leaned in. I've got a friend. Works in the county property compliance office. He's been tracking illegal HOA actions for years. If you're up for it, he's willing to meet. I agreed. What did I have to lose? 2 days later, I met Monroe's friend, a man named Ellis, in a dingy diner just outside town. Late 50s, gray goatee, wore suspenders and talked like he'd seen everything, and probably had. Karen Thompson? he said, stirring his coffee. Oh yeah, we've had her name on our radar since 2016. You're not the first she's done this to. You're just the loudest. He pulled out a manila folder, always a manila folder, and slid it across the table. Inside were photos, property records, and reports. Apparently, Karen had jumped HOA boards in 3 different counties. Always the same story. She'd rise to power, enforce outrageous fines, remove residents' property, then disappear once the lawsuits piled up. Thing is, Ellis said, she always had help. 3 men, all with different names on paper, but always showing up in her orbit. Contractors, towing companies, private investigators. Ghosts, basically. One of them even tried to file a lien on a veteran's house in Brookdale. He ended up disappearing completely before the trial. I sat back, chills climbing up my spine. You're saying she's part of a scam ring? He nodded. A sophisticated one, legal enough to get by, crooked enough to ruin lives. That's when I realized something. Apex Towing, the company that dragged my Jetski like it was garbage, wasn't even registered with the Better Business Bureau. I'd looked it up once before, but it hadn't clicked. I raced home that night and pulled up the old invoice. Then I started tracing the address. The business location? Empty lot. The phone number? Disconnected. But the bank account listed for payment? Still active. With Ellis and Monroe guiding me, we launched something bigger than I ever imagined. An official investigation. Over the course of 2 weeks, subpoenas were issued. Digital records were pulled. Property transfers were tracked. And then came the bombshell. Karen had quietly funneled over $200,000 in community funds into a dummy construction company owned by one of her so-called vendors. That vendor? Her ex-husband, a man named Clifford Barnes, previously convicted for real estate fraud in another state. And the worst part? He lived right in Lakeside Glen, just 3 houses over from the clubhouse. He'd been hiding in plain sight, quiet, unassuming, smiling at cookouts. I lost it. I marched straight to his house one morning, fists clenched, and banged on his door. Denise tried to stop me, but I couldn't let it go anymore. Clifford opened the door, wearing a robe and holding a coffee mug, like he didn't have a care in the world. You Michael? He asked, squinting. You destroyed my Jetski. You stole from this community. And now I know who you really are. His smirk dropped. Before he could slam the door, 2 unmarked cars pulled up. Monroe stepped out with 3 uniformed officers. Clifford tried to bolt, made it 2 steps, got tackled on his lawn. That day was like a movie. Karen, still in custody, was blindsided with the news that her entire operation had unraveled. Louis cut a full deal with the state, offering up detailed accounts of every forged document, every false vote, every manufactured HOA violation. Denise and I watched it all unfold like a courtroom drama, only we were no longer the victims. We were the witnesses. When the final hearing came, the judge looked at me and said, Mr. Avery, without your persistence, this fraud would have continued for years. You didn't just stand up for yourself. You stood up for your entire neighborhood. I thought I'd feel triumphant, victorious. But instead, I felt relieved. Relieved that it was over. Or so I thought. 3 weeks after the dust settled, Denise and I decided to take a break. We drove out to the lake for the weekend. Just the 2 of us. Rented a cabin, made a fire, toasted marshmallows. On the last night, we sat by the water, watching the stars. I still think about it sometimes, Denise said quietly. Everything we went through. I know, I replied, but it's behind us now. That's when I saw it. Across the lake, faint headlights. A truck, backing up toward the water, too far to see the plates, but just clear enough to notice the decal on the side. Apex. My blood ran cold, because if someone was still using that name, it meant one thing. The network was still alive. And this was just the beginning.